This is the last straw, George.
But, Uncle—
Enough! I've bailed you out time and again, and all I ask,
if I might explain, sir—
all I ask is that you pay me the courtesy of at least pretending to do some work for this company. I had hoped once that you might join the board, maybe succeed me one day, but this is the last straw.
You're absolutely right, Uncle, and I apologize unreservedly.
Let's see how you live, writing poems all day.
Not very well, I should think. You see, it was a birthday party, morally obliged to go, one of my oldest friends.
And?
It went on rather late. Rather than try to get a cab home at that hour, I decided to stay the night. Then with one thing and another, I sort of overslept, and
alcohol had nothing to do with it, I suppose.
It may have played a small role in assisting me to sleep, but it's really my clothes that held me up.
What the devil do you mean, sir?
I couldn't locate them. Turned out to be a jape. Old Charlie has a strange sense of humour. He hid them.
The money you spend on clothing is nothing short of a disgrace. The Bible says,
oh Lord,
consider the lilies of the field, for they toil not. I say to the lilies, consider George Rowland, and pull yourselves together.
That's rather good.
On your way out, kindly close the door.
And so, in one swift move, I went from being the apple of my uncle's eye to his greatest disappointment. I had hopes he might come round eventually, but he might not. Meanwhile, what to do for money? In these clothes they won't even give me the dole. Pity Charlie gave them me back, in a way. And Uncle's right. Writing poems and selling them at the door at twopence each won't wash. Anyway, I simply haven't the brains. There's only one thing for it, I decided. Attempt to distinguish myself at Rowland's Castle, the cradle of my historic race. Not an actual castle, but the name of a village. A fact never broadcast to my tailor, who gives me undeserved credit based on his assumption I am landed nobility. A return to the actual homestead is not likely to yield much more than a roof over my head. But right now that will be welcome. How pleased they were when they waved me off to the city in my uncle's care. Ah, well, be a man, George. You've brought it on yourself. To Waterloo, as Wellington said on the eve of the historic battle. Waterloo Station was not at its brightest and best that afternoon, and it was an undistinguished train, an unimposing train, a train that nobody seemed anxious to travel by. I had a first-class carriage myself up in the front of the train. A fog was descending in an indeterminate way over the metropolis. Now it lifted, now it descended. The platform was deserted, and only the asthmatic breathing of the engine broke the silence. And then all of a sudden things began to happen with bewildering rapidity. A girl happened first. She wrenched open the door and jumped in. "Oh, hide me! Oh, please hide me!" I am essentially a man of action, mine not to reason why, but to do and die, etc. There's only one place to hide in a railway carriage, under the seat. In 7 seconds the girl was bestowed there, with my suitcase negligently standing on end, covering her retreat. None too soon, as an infuriated face appeared at the carriage window.
"My niece! You have her here! I want my niece!"
I laid my newspaper aside with a nonchalant air. "I beg your pardon, sir?"
"My niece! What have you done with her?"
Acting on the policy that attack is always better than defence, I leapt into action. "What the devil do you mean?" I cried, with a very creditable imitation of my uncle. The other paused a minute, taken aback by this sudden fierceness. He was a fat man, still panting a little as though he'd run some way. His hair was cut en brosse, and he had a moustache of a Germanic persuasion. His accents were decidedly guttural, and the stiffness of his carriage denoted that he was more at home in uniform than out of it. Now, I have the true-born Briton's prejudice against foreigners, and an especial distaste for this one. "What the devil do you mean, sir?" I repeated angrily.
"She came in here. I saw her. What have you done with her?"
"So that's it, is it? Blackmail? Ha! But you've tried it on the wrong person. I read all about you in the Daily Mail this morning. Guard, here, guard!" Already attracted from afar by the altercation, the guard came hurrying up. "Here, guard, this fellow is annoying me. I'll give him in charge for attempted blackmail, if necessary. Pretends I've got his niece hidden in here. There's a regular gang of these foreigners trying this sort of thing. It ought to be stopped. Take him away, will you? Here's my card, if you want it." The guard looked at both of us, thinking, but his mind was soon made up. His training led him to respect and admire well-dressed gentlemen who travelled first class. He laid his hand on the shoulder of the intruder.
"Oh, you! Come out of this!" "Gott in Himmel! What's enough of that sort of talk? Stand away, will you? She's due out."
Flags were waved and whistles were blown. With an unwilling jerk, the train drew out of the station. "It's quite all right. You can come out now." "Oh, how can I thank you?" "It's quite all right. It's been a pleasure, I assure you." I had hardly had time to take in her appearance, so sudden had been her arrival, and so brief a space of time before she crawled into hiding, but she was certainly a trim and well-dressed young woman who had disappeared under the seat. Now her little red hat was crushed and dented, and her face was disfigured with long streaks of dirt. "Oh," she said, catching sight of her image reflected in the carriage window. She fumbled for her bag. Tactfully I looked fixedly out of the window and admired the streets of London south of the Thames. "How can I thank you?" Taking this as a hint that conversation might now be resumed, I turned and made another polite disclaimer, but this time with a good deal of added warmth. The girl was absolutely lovely. Never before had I seen such a lovely girl. "I think it was simply splendid of you." "Not at all. Easiest thing in the world. Only too pleased to have been of use. Splendid. The awkward part of it is that I'm afraid I can't explain." "You can't explain?" "No." "Well, how perfectly splendid." "I beg your pardon?" "I said how perfectly splendid. It's just like one of those books that keep you up all night. The heroine says I can't explain in the first chapter, and she explains it in the last. And of course there's never any real reason why she shouldn't have done so in the beginning, except it would spoil the story. Oh, I can't tell you how pleased I am to be mixed up in a real mystery. I didn't know there were such things. I hope it's got something to do with secret documents of immense importance. And the Balkan Express, I dote upon the Balkan Express." "What makes you say the Balkan Express?" "I hope I haven't been indiscreet." "Your uncle travelled by it, perhaps?" "My uncle?" "Quite so. I've got an uncle myself. Nobody should be held responsible for their uncles. Nature's little throwbacks, that's how I look at them." She began to laugh suddenly. When she spoke next, I became aware of a slight foreign inflection in her voice. At first I hadn't noticed, taken her to be English. "What a refreshing and unusual person you are, Mr. Roland. George to my friends. My name is Elizabeth." She stopped abruptly. "I like the name of Elizabeth. Oh, they don't call you Bessie or anything horrible like that, I hope?" "No." "Well, now that we know each other, we'd better get down to business. If you'll stand up, Elizabeth, I'll brush down the back of your coat." "Thank you, Mr. Roland." George to my friends, remember? And you can't come into my nice empty carriage, roll under the seat, induce me to tell lies to your uncle, and then refuse to be friends, can you?" "Thank you, George." "That's better." "Do I look all right now?" she asked, trying to see over her left shoulder. You look all right." "It was all so sudden, you see." "It must have been. He saw us in the taxi, and then at the station I just bolted in here, knowing he was close behind me. Where is this train going to, by the way?" "Rowland's Castle." Where? Rowland's Castle. Not at once, of course, only after a good deal of stopping and slow going, but I confidently expected to be there before midnight. The old South Western was a very reliable line, slow but sure, and I'm sure the Southern Railway is keeping up the old traditions. I don't know that I want to go to Rowland's Castle. You hurt me. It's a delightful spot. And there are lots of other places you can go to if you don't fancy Rowland's Castle. There's Woking and Weybridge and Wimbledon. The train is sure to stop at one or other of them. I see. Yes. I can get out there and perhaps motor back to London. That would be the best plan, I think. Even as she spoke, the train began to slow up. If I can do anything— No, indeed, you've done a lot already. I wish I could explain. Oh, for heaven's sake, don't do that. It would spoil everything. But look here, isn't there something that I could do? Carry the secret papers to Vienna, or something like that? There always are secret papers. Do give me a chance. It's stopped. I must go. But as she alighted, she turned back a moment uncertainly. Then she said, "Look, are you in earnest? Would you really do something for us, for me?" "I'd do anything in the world for you, Elizabeth, even if I could give you no reasons. Rotten things, reasons. Even if it were dangerous. The more danger, the better. Look down the platform, as though you weren't really looking. Do you see that man getting in with a small dark beard, light overcoat? Follow him, see what he does and where he goes. Is that all? Further instructions will be sent to you. Watch him, and guard this." She thrust a small sealed packet into my hand. "Guard it with your life. It is the key to everything." The train went on. I remained staring out of the window, watching Elizabeth's tall, graceful figure threading its way down the platform. In my hand I clutched the small sealed packet tightly. The rest of the journey was both monotonous and uneventful. The train was a slow one. It stopped everywhere, at every station. I peered out of the window in case my quarry should alight. The eventual destination of the train was Portsmouth, and here the black-bearded traveller alighted. I followed him to a small second-class hotel where he booked a room. I did likewise. I made sure my room was in the same corridor, 2 doors down. I may be a complete novice in the art of shadowing, but I was anxious to acquit myself well and justify Elizabeth's trust in me. At dinner I secured a table not far from that of my quarry. The room was not full, the majority of diners, I suspect, being commercial travellers, quite respectable men who ate their food with appetite. One man attracted my notice, though, a small man with ginger hair and a moustache, and a suggestion of horsiness in his apparel. He seemed to be interested in me, too, and suggested a drink and a game of billiards when the meal had come to a close. But the black-bearded man was putting on his hat and overcoat, and so I declined politely. In another minute I was out in the street. The chase was a long and weary one, and in the end it seemed to lead nowhere. After twisting and turning through the streets of Portsmouth for about 4 miles, the man returned to the hotel. Oh dear! Is it possible he's aware of my presence? At that moment the outer door was pushed open, and the little ginger man entered the lobby. Evidently he, too, had been out for a stroll. "Excuse me, Mr. Rowland, isn't it?" "Indeed. 2 gentlemen have called to see you, sir. 2 foreign gentlemen. They are in the little room at the end of the passage." Somewhat astonished, I sought the room in question. 2 men were sitting there, and they rose to their feet and bowed punctiliously. "Mr. Rowland, I have no doubt, sir, that you can guess our identity." The spokesman was the elder of the 2, a grey-haired, pompous gentleman. The other was a tall, somewhat pimply young man, with a blonde Teutonic cast of countenance, which was not rendered more attractive by the fierce scowl which he wore at the present moment. "Pray sit down, gentlemen. I'm delighted to make your acquaintance. How about a drink?" "No, thank you, Lord Rowland, not for us. We have but a few brief moments, just time for you to answer a question." "Well, it's very kind of you to elect me to the peerage. I'm sorry you won't have a drink. And what is this momentous question?" Lord Roland, you left London in company with a certain lady. You arrived here alone. Where is the lady? I fail to understand the question. I have the honour to wish you good evening, gentlemen. But you do understand it! You understand it perfectly! What have you done, Alexa? Be calm, sir. I beg of you to be calm. I can assure you that I know no lady of that name. There is some mistake. That can hardly be. I took the opportunity of examining the hotel register. You entered yourself as Mr. G. Roland of Roland's Castle. Ah, yes, well, that's a little joke of mine. It's not really a somewhat poor subterfuge. Come, let us not beat about the bush. Where is Her Highness? You mean Elizabeth? With a howl of rage, the young man flung himself forward again. Insolent pig-dog! To speak of her thus! I am referring, said the other slowly, as you very well know, to the Grand Duchess Anastasia Sophia Alexandra Marie Helena Olga Elizabeth of Catalonia. Oh, I tried to recall all I've ever known of Catalonia. It is, as far as I remember, a small Balkan kingdom, and I seem to remember something about a revolution having occurred there. Evidently we mean the same person, only I call her Elizabeth. You will give me satisfaction for that? We will fight. Fight? A duel. I never fight duels. And why not? I'm too afraid of getting hurt. Ah, is that so? Then I will at least pull your nose for you. Brash young chaps used to try that one at Eton. Fellows like me soon learned what to do. As he came forward, arms flailing, I executed a neat sidestep and a quick step forward. He went past me and, carried by the momentum of his actions, fell flat on his face. I smiled pleasantly. As I was saying, I'm always afraid of getting hurt, so take steps, if you'll pardon the pun, to avoid doing so, whenever possible. There was a pause. The two foreigners looked doubtfully at me, as if some dangerous quality lurked under my pleasant nonchalance of manner. The younger Teuton was white with passion. "You will repent this." The older man retained his dignity. "That is your last word, Lord Roland? You refuse to tell us Her Highness's whereabouts?" "I am unaware of them myself." "You can hardly expect me to believe that. I am afraid you are of an unbelieving nature, then, sir." The other merely shook his head. "This is not the end." They took their leave. Events were proceeding at a bewildering rate. I seemed to be mixed up in a first-class European scandal. It might even mean another war. Now, where on earth has become of the man with the black beard? To my relief, I discovered him sitting in a corner of the commercial room. I sat down in another corner. In about 3 minutes, the black-bearded man got up and went to bed. I followed and saw him go into his room and close the door. Thank goodness I need a night's rest. Need it badly. But suppose he realizes I'm on his trail? Suppose he slips away during the night? A few minutes' reflection suggested a way of dealing with this difficulty. I unravelled one of my socks till I got a good length of neutral-coloured wool. Then, creeping quietly out of my room, pasted one end to the farther side of the stranger's door with stamp paper, carrying the wool across it and along to my own room. Then I hung the end with a small silver bell, a relic of the last night's entertainments. Excellent. Should he make a move, I shall be instantly warned by the ringing of the bell. Ha ha! I set myself to sleep, and placed the package carefully under my pillow. But I could not sleep. My mind went back and forth over the events of the day. Anastasia, Sophia, Marie, Alexandra, Olga, Elizabeth. Hang it all, I've missed one out. I wonder now, what is it all about? What is the connection between an escaping Grand Duchess, a sealed packet, and of a black-bearded man. What is the Grand Duchess escaping from? Are those foreigners aware I have the packet? What on earth can be in it? Pondering these matters with an irritated sense of being no nearer a solution, I fell asleep. The faint jangle of a bell wakened me. It took me a few minutes to remember the situation. Then I jumped up, thrust on some slippers, and, opening the door with the utmost caution, slipped out into the corridor. A faint moving patch of shadow at the far end of a passage showed me his direction. Moving quickly, I was just in time to see the black-bearded man disappear into a bathroom. This was puzzling, as there is a bathroom just opposite his room. Moving up close to the door of the bathroom he had entered, which was ajar, I peered through the crack. The man was on his knees by the side of a bath, doing something to the skirting board immediately behind it. He remained there for about 5 minutes. Then he rose to his feet. I beat a prudent retreat. Safe in the shadow of my own door, I watched him pass and regain his own room. Good. And the mystery of the bathroom can be investigated tomorrow morning. Returning to my bed, I slipped my hand under the pillow to check the precious packet was still there. It's gone! Scattering the bedclothes in panic, I began a frantic search. It was no good. The package was gone all right. What a fool I am! The whole thing was a diversion, a trick, and I fell for it.
Are you ready to order breakfast, sir?
Oh, just some eggs and bacon, please.
Certainly, sir.
I could scarcely eat, and sat at breakfast as much through habit as desire. I stared at the food when it came, ate a little, pushed the plate away. Elizabeth entrusted me with that precious packet, and I allowed it to be taken from me. I had failed her miserably. As for the secret in the bathroom, a letter of the kind which is of no interest to anyone but its recipient. Another dead end. To my surprise, I found that during this brief reverie I had eaten the breakfast. Such are the mysteries of humanity. I strolled upstairs again. The chambermaid was standing in the passage, looking perplexed. "Anything wrong, my dear?" "It's a gentleman here, sir. He asked to be called at 8:30. I can't get any answer, and the door's locked." "You don't say so." An uneasy feeling rose in my breast. I hurried into my room, but whatever plan was forming in my mind was instantly brushed aside by a most unexpected sight. There on the dressing-table was the little packet which had been stolen the night before. I picked it up and examined it. Yes, undoubtedly the same one, but the seals had been broken. After a minute's hesitation, I unwrapped it. If other people had seen its contents, there was no reason why I should not see them also. Besides, it was possible that the contents had been abstracted. The unwound paper revealed a small cardboard box, such as jewellers use. Inside, nestling on a bed of cotton wool, a plain gold wedding ring. No inscription inside. Nothing but an ordinary wedding ring. Oh, lunacy. That's what it is. Stark, staring lunacy. There is no sense anywhere. Then I remembered the reason I'd rushed in here, the chambermaid's statement. Outside my window runs a broad parapet, and though not a feat I would ordinarily have attempted, curiosity and anger were my spurs. I sprang upon the window-sill, and a few seconds later was peering in at the window of the room occupied by the black-bearded man. The window was open, and the room was empty. A little further along is a fire escape. Clearly this is how my quarry had taken his departure. I jumped in through a window, the missing man's effects still scattered about. There might be a clue among them. I began with the contents of a battered kit-bag. What's that? A very slight sound, but a sound indubitably in the room. My glance leapt to the big wardrobe. Quickly I sprang up and wrenched open the door. Ah! He jumped out at me, and we went rolling over the floor, locked in combat. And he was no mean antagonist. All my tricks of self-preservation learned on the playing fields of Eton availed very little. Obviously, a Harrow man. We fell apart at length in sheer exhaustion. The first time I saw who it was. The little man with the ginger moustache. "Who the devil are you?" For answer he drew out a card. "Detective Inspector Gerald, Scotland Yard." "Oh,
"That's right, sir, and you'd do well to tell me all you know about this business."
"I would I? Do you know, Inspector, I believe you're right. Shall we adjourn to a more cheerful spot?" In a quiet corner of the bar, I unfolded my soul. Inspector Gerald listened sympathetically. "Very puzzling, as you say, sir. There's a lot that I can't make head or tail of myself. But here's one or two points I can clear up for you. I was here after Mardenberg, your black-bearded friend, and your turning up and watching the way you did made me suspicious. I couldn't place you. I slipped into your room last night when you were out of it, and it was I who sneaked the little packet from under your pillow. When I opened it and found it wasn't what I was after, I took the first opportunity of returning it to your room. Well, that makes things a little clearer, certainly. I seem to have made rather an ass of myself all through."
"I wouldn't say that, sir. You did uncommon well for a beginner. You say you visited this bathroom this morning and took away what was concealed behind the skirting board?"
"Yes, but it's only a rotten love letter. Dash it all, I didn't mean to go nosing out the poor fellow's private life."
"Would you mind letting me see it, sir?"
I took the letter from my pocket and passed it to him.
"As you say, sir. But I rather fancy that if you drew lines from one dotted I to another, you'd get a different result." "Why, bless you, sir, this is a plan of the Portsmouth Harbour defences."
"What?"
"Yes. We've had our eye on this gentleman for some time, but he was too sharp for us. Got a woman to do most of the dirty work."
"A woman? What was her name?"
"Oh, she goes by a good many, sir. Most usually known as Betty."
"Betty?"
"Yes, Betty Bright Eyes. A remarkably good-looking young woman she is."
"Betty Bright Eyes. Oh, thank you, Inspector."
"Excuse me, sir, you're not looking well."
"I'm not well. I'm very ill. In fact, I think I'd better take the first train back to town."
"Well, that'll be a slow train this time of day. Better wait for the express."
"It doesn't matter. No train can be slower than the one I came down by yesterday." Seated once more in a first-class carriage, I leisurely perused the day's news. Good heavens! A romantic wedding took place yesterday in London, when Lord Roland Gay, second son of the Marquis of Axminster, was married to the Grand Duchess Anastasia of Cattonia. The ceremony was kept a profound secret. The Grand Duchess has been living in Paris with her uncle since the upheaval in Cattonia. She met Lord Roland when he was secretary to the British Embassy in Cattonia, and their attachment dates from that time. Well, well.
Duck halt! Duck halt! All aboard, please!"
"Is this seat taken?" "Why, good morning, George." "Elizabeth!" She smiled at me, as large as life and looking, if possible, lovelier than ever. "Look here, for God's sake, tell me, are you the Grand Duchess Anastasia, or are you Betty Bright Eyes?" "What? I'm not either. I'm Elizabeth Gay. I can tell you all about it now, and I must apologize too. You see, Roland, that's my brother, has always been in love with Alex, meaning the Grand Duchess." "Yes, that's what the family call her. Well, as I say, Roland was always in love with her, and she with him. And then the revolution came, and Alexa was in Paris, and they were just going to fix it up when old Strum, the Chancellor, came along and insisted on carrying off Alexa and forcing her to marry Prince Karl, her cousin, a horribly pimply person. I fancy I've met him, whom she simply hates. And old Prince Usrik, her uncle, forbade her to see Roland again, so she ran away to England, and I came up to town to meet her, and we wired to Roland, who was in Scotland. And just at the very last minute, when we were driving to a registry office in a taxi, whom should we meet in another taxi face to face but old Prince Osric? Of course he followed us, and we were at our wits' end what to do, because he'd have made the most fearful scene. And anyway, he is her guardian. Then I had the brilliant idea of changing places. You can practically see nothing of a girl nowadays but the tip of her nose. So I put on Alexa's red hat and brown wrap coat, and she put on my grey. Then we told the taxi to go to Waterloo, and I skipped out and there hurried into the station. Old Osric followed the red hat, without a thought for any other occupant of the taxi sitting huddled up inside. But of course it wouldn't do for him to see my face, so I just bolted into your carriage and threw myself on your mercy. I've got that all right. It's the rest of it. I know. That's what I've got to apologize about. I hope you won't be awfully cross. You see, you looked so keen on its being a real mystery, like in books. I couldn't resist the temptation. I picked out a rather sinister-looking man on the platform and told you to follow him, and then I thrust the parcel on you. Containing a wedding ring. Yes, Alexa and I bought that, because Roland wasn't due to arrive from Scotland until just before the wedding, and of course I knew that by the time I got to London they wouldn't want it now. They would have had to use a curtain ring or something. I see. It's like all these things. So simple when you know. That man really was a villain, you know. Really? I've always been good at judging character. Allow me, Elizabeth. I stripped off her left glove, and uttered a sigh of relief at the sight of her bare third finger. That's all right. The ring won't be wasted after all. Oh! 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 But I don't know anything about you. You know how nice I am. And you are such a good judge of character. That's true. By the way, it's just occurred to me. You're Lady Elizabeth Gay. Oh, George, are you a snob? As a matter of fact, I am, rather. My best dream is one where King George borrows half a crown from me to see him for the weekend. But I was thinking of my uncle, the one from whom I'm estranged. He's a frightful snob. When he knows I'm going to marry you, and that we'll have a title in the family, he'll make me a partner at once. Oh, George, is he very rich? Elizabeth, are you mercenary? Yes, I adore spending money. But I was thinking of father. 5 daughters, full of beauty and blue blood. He's just yearning for a rich son-in-law. Well, it'll be one of those marriages made in heaven and approved on earth. Shall we live at Roland's Castle? They'd be sure to make me Lord Mayor with you for a wife. Oh, Elizabeth, darling, it's probably contravening the company's bylaws, but I simply must kiss you. I haven't said yes yet. Oh, but you will, won't you? Of course I will.
On your way out, kindly close the door.